Hi there, and welcome to another episode of 411 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and with me is Danielle Almendra, my special guest star. How you doing tonight, Danielle?
Fantastic.
Me too, because we are going to be finally doing a VC Andrews episode. It's been a minute. We've been super busy. We have a few that we have planned, but it was pain trying to get this episode filmed. So we're just going to have time for a quick one, but it's a good one. It is Who is Cathy's True Love? Cathy Dollanganger, Foxworth, Marquette, Sheffield. It's a good one. I think the main candidates are Julian Marquette, Paul Sheffield, Bartholomew Winslow, and Christopher Dollanganger. I just finished reading the V.C. Andrews biography, which I loved. This one is about to read it. She is about to go on vacation, so she doesn't have time yet, but we will do a review of that down the road. But I love the biography, but I'm excited to talk about this one. I think we did our Who is Heaven's True Love, and I think that, these are gothic thrillers, the sort of child abuse aspect, but the horror, all that. I think romance, though, is a big part of the series. I think we read them when we're in our adolescent years with the sort of, and we don't quite realize the extent of, like, the incest angle. I think now that we've seen it played out on Lifetime, I think a lot of us all, I still understand, I still love the stories, but when you do see it sort of on screen, you're sort of like, oh, I do feel a little awkward watching it. But we do still read it for a big part of it is the romance. So we thought it'd be fun to talk about this. I think we should jump right in, though, to Julian Marquette. What do you think in terms of Julian Marquette? Yeah, I think he's kind of the worst.
He is the worst.
Yeah.
Sadly, because, and we'll get into the other reasons why some of the other ones are not appropriate either. However, Julian was narcissistic. He was abusive. He's a cheater. The worst thing, the only good quality that he had was the dancing. And
Right.
I think that what V.C. Andrews did by putting her with a dancer was so we could feel that romance of that perfect match on stage. And it did work for a little while, because when you're reading the book and you're hearing how wonderful they are,
Yeah.
and it does give you the little tinglies. But then when you read, how he is off stage, you're like, he is horrific. So
Horrific.
no on him.
Yeah,
Not
agreed.
the true love
No.
at all.
Yeah, I think that, just how abusive he was to her,
Yeah.
how the whole, so manipulative. I always kind of think of the, like, what you gonna do now, honey child comment he makes when he, like,
Mhm.
she wants to go and see Christopher's graduation in Petals on the Wind. And yeah, Julian was introduced in Petals on the Wind, and it's that whole, she is sort of dealing with Paul, trying to get over Christopher. I think, the one thing you can kind of sort of speculate on in terms of a theory is if things had been different, if, Cathy had not been subjected with her siblings in the attic, if her father hadn't died, and, there is a passage in Petals on the Wind where Cathy sort of reflects back on her relationship with Julian and how
Right.
if they had met the way they were supposed to met, that maybe it would be true love. But I will say, I think sometimes people, it's just, if it's in your nature to be a certain way, then I think that sort of jealousy, a big part of, I think, Julian's attraction to Cathy, the initial attraction is her beauty, but a lot of it is that sort of he can never have her,
Yeah.
and he knows that, which is why he gets insanely jealous of all the other men. But he
Absolutely.
cheats on Cathy with Yolanda.
Horrible.
Yeah,
He
he's
hits
just
on Carrie.
oh yeah,
God, like,
he's
he's
the
a
yeah,
pig.
yeah, and it's and poor Carrie is such a victim in that, and
Yes. Oh.
she's thinking, she's feeling bad about it, she's
Yes.
feeling all this guilt, and he totally took advantage of Carrie. I totally
Mhm.
spaced on that. You're right, and I think just she, and it bugs me because I do know who I think is Cathy's true love, but in, like, If There Be Thorns, etc. She's so with Jory,
Yeah.
reflects all the time about, it's not like she's ever like, oh, your father was great, but it's almost sort of like wistfully always thinking about him. But I think it's more related and tangled up with her dancing days,
Yes.
because Julian is the fantasy
Yes.
for Cathy of
Yeah.
the
The
supreme
perfect
dancer,
match. Yes.
right?
The perfect match on stage.
But and they are well matched. If you do want to argue sort of potentially true love, they both are vengeful. They both have parents that they resent and want to have their own unique revenge upon. And I do think that that is something to be said, especially with the Lifetime adaptations about how they sort of downplayed Cathy's vengeful nature. I always love the Cathy that's like bitter and you want her to be happy, but you also, there's the juicy element of her being bitter and the revenge, and like, when somebody pisses Cathy off, like, oh, it's a matter of time before she's gonna go off on them. And I think that's part of Julian too.
I think overall, again, if they were just on stage, could have been a possibility, but you can't ignore all the stuff that he did to her outside of that, and just keeping her from her family, the abuse, using her sister, all of these things.
And I think there's something to be said that you can always say if this had happened or if this had happened so much. It's what happened. And I do think that if she hadn't been so aloof because of her issues with Paul and Christopher, I don't think that he would have been as attracted to her. I think it was the sort of, he can't have her, so he wants her.
I almost think she wouldn't have gone with him if she wasn't trying to run away from Christopher.
Correct.
And or Paul.
Correct.
At that time. So
maybe if it had been different, but it wasn't. So now I think we should move on to Paul.
Yep, I agree.
Paul Sheffield. I don't know. I've been trying to think back. I don't think that he is Cathy's true love, but I think that over the years, it has the whole age thing came out. But, I don't know if I can be so subjective because I was probably about 13 when I read these books. So I didn't have it in my head, the age difference being that big of a deal. Obviously, now I have a huge issue with it. I don't have an issue with people with huge age differences. I have an issue with that she was 15, and he was
supposed to be like a parental
father.
figure.
Correct. Yeah.
So that was my problem.
But I will say, at 13 reading it, it is sort of, I had just read Flowers in the Attic, so I knew that there was going to be the sex element, the romance element. So the fact that Cathy was having feelings and you're in Cathy's POV, I was having those feelings too. Yeah. And it's been so long, but I was, when we were preparing for this episode, trying to think about Paul and just like, yeah, he's awful and ridiculous. But I was trying to go back to my first time reading it, and I still, now that I'm saying it out loud, I really don't think, I think there's a problem. There's a part of me that wants to sort of defend him, and I'm like, I just can't say that.
Can't.
I can't. And I'm glad, honestly, of all the, I hated that they added the whole Sarah thing to the Lifetime Petals on the Wind, only because, if they wanted to make a 2-hour movie out of it and you want to include all Sarah stuff, fine. But I love that they removed Paul from it, because if there is one character that can be removed to tell the Petals on the Wind story officially, it is Paul. And I think that it was the right call, but it's also the right call because I feel like I would have been uncomfortable.
It's just uncomfortable with Chris and Cathy, but you kind of need that because Chris continues on through all of them.
Yes, that's a really good point.
I don't think, at least audiences outside of the fan base would be like, what the heck is going on? It'd be very unsettling. I mean, the fact that they put the incest in there to begin with, they kind of had to, but this, absolutely good call, Lifetime, taking that out.
You're so right.
Additionally, Paul was supposed to be a father. He was their safe haven. They just went through this horrible, tragic thing, and I'm sorry, but Cathy was vulnerable, and he took advantage of that. This older man, completely,
took advantage of it.
It's just the ick factor, I guess.
Yeah.
There's not too much to say. He was supposed to be a father figure, and he took advantage of her in her vulnerable state. And I think he kind of knew something was happening with Chris, and there was some kind of situation there. And, she ran to Paul because of that. She was also trying to escape Chris as well, because she knew with Chris it was wrong. But Cathy, honey, was still wrong with Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say I think you made a really excellent point, because what I was thinking in my mind, okay, Petals on the Wind for the Lifetime adaptation, they jumped ahead 10 years, so they were already in their 20s. But just like we were commenting, we were saying earlier about seeing the incest now, you are sort of like, it's a little difficult to watch, whereas in the books you're sort of not, you can have a little bit more sympathy or empathy about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, trying to imagine, say Kiernan Shipka, who played Cathy in Flowers in the Attic, the Lifetime adaptation, if I had seen her or watched her with Paul, they had included him in the Lifetime version, I would have had the same reaction of oh no, I can't take that. And I think that's a really good point. I think
when we were reading the books, we knew Chris was wrong.
Right.
So at that point, it didn't matter who she was with. We were happy to see her relationship with somebody else. So I think that's why, at least for me, when I was reading the books as a younger lady, that it was more accepting at that time. But now that, I'm older, You're right. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Ick. Ick all the
Well,
way.
and I think you can also look at Paul's relationship with Julia and the type of person that he is.
Hmm.
He did take care of her after this, but, Julia had a lot of issues mentally, and at that time in history, they were not going to be dealt with in a
Yeah.
way that was ever going to fix her. But he did force himself upon Julia, and he did cheat on Julia quite a bit. And I think that, like, he should have. I think Julia would have maybe still had the same. Still would have had the same results, but he should have told Julia, "This is how I feel. I'm going to have this affair." And I think he was like, "Oh, I don't want to hurt her," but the lies tend to hurt way more than the
Yeah, the
action.
truth.
You don't,
Right.
the action hurts too, and of course, it's like you can't just say, "Oh, just tell the truth." Of course, you're going to be hurt,
Yeah.
but I think that was the fundamental character flaw of Paul, that he was willing to lie,
Yeah.
and I think that it speaks to his character in general. But overall, yeah, Paul, not Cathy's true love.
No.
And I'm kind of glad that they cut all that from
I
the
am too.
Lifetime adaptations. And I don't know exactly who you're going to say, because you kind of alluded that you had sort of rethought things, but I guess we'll move on to Bart and sort of segue with Christopher as well. Personally, I think that Bart was Cathy's true love. I've said that on other episodes. I think it's stronger more than ever. I guess I could speak to whatever you're going to say, but the main things are, I think that when she was of that age, she was having sort of she knew her feelings for Christopher were getting blurred, but I think the first man she ever really had a crush on was Bart. I think that always stuck with her. I think that, yes, she used Bart for revenge, but like she said, it's one of my favorite moments from Petals on the Wind when she says, "Somehow, without meaning to let it happen, I've fallen madly, idiotically in love with him." And I think that spans the rest of her life with how she was with her son Bart. It was the guilt, it was everything. But what do you think about Bart? I have a lot more to say about Bart, but what do you think?
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change my tune a little bit. I used to be in agreement with Justin that Bart was Cathy's true love. And in prepping for this episode, I really had to take a step back and really objectively think about it.
Okay.
And in my opinion, I'm gonna get some backlash. I know I will. I think Chris is Cathy's true love. And we can get into some of those details after we talk about Bart, because I do agree with a lot of that. And I've
Sure.
always really thought that Bart was Cathy's true love up until, I don't know, last week when we decided to do this episode.
Well, we hadn't discussed this, but I had a feeling you were going to switch to Christopher, so I'm glad that we're going to kind of talk about them maybe debatably together, but
I want to take the brother factor out.
you can't take the brother factor out.
I know.
But
And
okay, go ahead if you want to.
Okay, so here's my thing with Bart. Okay. Bart was Cathy's mother's husband. Technically, her stepfather. He's also older. While he's younger than Corinne, he's still older than Cathy.
Right, he's in that middle age.
Additionally,
I think he's 10 years older than Cathy and like 10 years younger than Corinne.
Yeah, something like that. He cheated on his wife. Let's just start there.
With his
okay?
true love, Cathy.
No. But he's a cheater. This is the thing I can't get around. Like, if he's willing to cheat on his wife now.
I like how you were willing to get around it, though, for Heaven and Troy. In our whole
It's
Heaven
different.
Troy debate.
It's
See,
different.
I mean, right here. Like, but okay, go ahead, make your point. But I think I've just made my point.
Again, it's really hard for me to articulate because I do love Bart. I think, I think for us, though, and we talked about this before, I think on camera too, is that Bart was the first real, like, non-relative, non-creepy Paul dude.
Right.
That Cathy, or
because she was of age. There
yeah,
was no,
and
we
Julian,
don't know how he would have been if she had approached him at 16. But I do feel like Bart
Right.
would have been like, and out.
Yeah, right.
But whereas Paul was like,
So
I can't, maybe
part
though.
of the true love excitement about picking Bart is that was the first time we really saw Cathy, like, in a, for lack of a better word, healthy relationship, even though it was her stepfather.
Oh yeah.
And I think that was the attraction, and that's why we feel that pull that that's her true love, because it's not incestually wrong. It's in both the case of Chris and technically Paul, because he was, her guardian and supposed to be her stepfather or her father figure. And then we've got Julian, when we've already decided is bad. So Bart is really where we tend to go to for Cathy's true love, I feel like.
Yeah, but I will say I don't factor in, the incest part so much. That's not a factor for me of Bart. I remember thinking it was so delicious, the story of how it was going, and I'm super great now at like watching a movie that is known for twist and guessing them right off the bat, but I certainly did not, even though I think it's so obvious that that's how Petals in the Wind would go. I never, when, at that age, I had no clue, and I was just like, oh, this is such a great
Yeah.
idea. Like, oh, I can't believe Kathy's gonna do this, and I loved it. And I love that the fact of how she does act, it's sort of, she starts it one way, but ultimately she falls in love with him, and she didn't mean for it to happen. And that was the one thing I was kind of frustrated with the Lifetime adaptation of they never clarified it, and she never, for her it
Right.
was just very disinfected or very removed.
Yes.
That this, that she was like, no, I don't love him. And she says it sort of weakly to Christopher, but and she's like, I do to Bart, she's like, I do feel, or I do care for you. But in the books,
Yeah,
I truly
she was
think,
absolutely in love with him.
I think so,
Absolutely.
and I think he really fell in love with her.
Yeah,
I
because he
think
backed her up, like in the book.
correct,
And that
correct,
scene was
yeah.
not enough in the Lifetime
No, that was the
adaptation.
big thing too. I wish they had really
Like
made that
Bart
confrontation
really,
more.
he sided with Cathy.
Yeah.
And he was like had her back, and I think that's what also attracted us to, like for me especially, originally having Bart as Cathy's true love.
Absolutely.
Because he was her knight. Like he was like, I believe you 100%. I think this woman did this to you, and I know her as good as you guys, if not better.
Right.
Because he's been married to the woman, so he knows what she's capable of. And so the fact that he believed her.
Oh yeah.
And had her back, I think, is what really drew me most of the time.
And I think that's what makes him her true love. I think that
I didn't get to talk to you about my case about Chris yet.
For sure, but she was, I was trying to say, she was, her feelings with Christopher locked in the attic were blurring the lines, but she hadn't quite, I don't think, fallen for Christopher yet, or even considered a love relationship with him, and that's why Bart got in there right before, because she had a crush on Bart from the moment that she laid eyes on him. And I think one of my favorite moments from Flower's Attic is when she does stumble upon Bart sleeping in the room. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad they still included this in the Lifetime adaptation, although in the Lifetime adaptation, she just kind of sneaks up to him. But in the books, what I love about Cathy is she's always a little cuckoo, and she sort of does a little pirouette dance. Or, whatever really on the toes. No, pirouette's turning. So it's like she's sort of like, whatever those steps are, fouettes or something. But anyway, she kind of like dances to him and then like lays a kiss, and it's very, ballet-esque. And I always really liked that. And the fact that, she's always sort of calling her mother Mrs. Winslow as sort of like this detached, like, you're not my mother, you're not who you were before. But I do think that Cathy's really kind of jealous the whole time that she's not Mrs. Winslow. And I love, and again, the Lifetime adaptation did cover this, where Cathy says she's even jealous that she's not invited to the party. But all of the romance between Bart and Cathy spans months and months in the book, and in the movie it's like just 3 scenes.
That's the part they really should have.
Right. That's why, they'd added this whole Sarah thing. And again, I think it was because they wanted to tie in the Christopher's novels that were coming out at the time.
Yeah, nobody cares about that.
Right. Exactly.
We do, but
it was, they were trying to give like, they were trying to give it like 3 equal stories to Christopher, Carrie, and Cathy, and that's fine, but then make a 2.5-hour movie. Because it's really Cathy's story, and that whole second half, last third of the book, if you will, is about that.
It was a little disappointing.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that's better than nothing. We never got it from the '87 movie, a sequel, or although how would it have even worked? I still would love to read the Petals on the Wind script that was created, because Corwin's gone, so you can't. This wouldn't work. Yeah. Bart knows the jig is up, so what are you gonna do? But in the book, she meets Bart. She has these feelings for Bart, but she's trying her best to not fall in love. But that's what makes it so great, is that she does. And like she says, she falls madly, idiotically in love with him. And he does ultimately come to her side, and he is going to choose her, which is why, again, I think this will be a theory down the road, because I do want to do an episode about, who started the fire at the party, because Cathy was up there with some candles, and Cathy sometimes, as we saw in If There Be Thorns, when she started making the attic kind of like the, Foxworth Hall attic, she can sometimes go out there a little. And I always wondered, did Corinne set the fire, or was it maybe Cathy? Was it an accident? So I think that'll be a theory episode down the road. But she did ultimately, he was going for her. He was, but that's why they accused Corinne of potentially setting the fire, because Corin knew that Bart chose Cathy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then I have more to say, or we'll see how it comes up. But Christopher Dollinger, go ahead. You go ahead and plead the rest of your case.
So whenever somebody is at a traumatic event, I feel like, especially in the case with Chris and Cathy, no one is ever going to understand what she went through except Chris. Because he went through the same thing. Not only did they go through, their whole lives together in adolescence and puberty and all of these things, they were parents together. They had a responsibility to take care of, Carrie and Corey. They suffered abuse, abandonment, neglect, all of these things. And despite all of that, we're able to get out of that attic, have lives and all of these things. But you can't just erase what happened. And Chris took on a responsibility for her as the protector, as the man of the house. And it's hard for him to let that go. And that's why
No, I agree.
He got into this thing where he was responsible for her and the twins. And I don't think he could have ever let that go. And I don't think he could have ever loved somebody else. Because I think Chris really suffered. He was always the eternal optimist. But I think he had to hold it together for Cathy. And I don't think he would have ever been able to explain to anybody what he went through. And without being able to do that and be 100% truthful, Chris would never have found anybody else. And Cathy knows what Chris went through. And I think because he was her protector, because he took care of them, because he did everything he could to get them out of that house, she did feel that bond with him. She felt that guilt and wanted to make him happy because he was the one who helped take care of her. He took the beating for her and, all of these things. So I don't think Cathy would have necessarily gone with Chris, obviously, if Bart had stayed around. But I think at that point, it was kind of like her accepting fate and saying, okay, well, obviously I lost Julian. I've lost Paul. Now I've lost Bart. Chris has been waiting. I know he loves me. Let me be with him. I know he's going to love my children and all of these things. And she could trust him. She knew that he was always going to be her protector. And he was, up until the very end. And he's a good guy.
Oh, yeah.
And we all love Chris, mostly, except for the little rapey thing. But Chris is a good guy, and he was put in a terrible situation. And I think that while maybe they weren't destined to be together as true loves, I think that's just how it happened, based on circumstances.
Well, I think that you make a lot of good points, and I think that, definitely there's something to be said for when you go through trauma, it does sort of create this bond with somebody else. I don't think that true love necessarily comes out of it every time, but I do think that the problem with this is that I think that Cathy is Christopher's true love. I don't believe Christopher is Cathy's true love, but I do believe Cathy is Christopher's true love for the
I can get on board with that.
Okay, for the same reasons of like a big also factor for me of why I think Bart is Cathy's true love is that in the novels she's reflecting once Bart is gone that all the men in her life she has constantly been trying to sculpt into the image of Bart. She made Paul grow a mustache because at the time Bart had grown a mustache. She chose Julian because of his dark hair and his temper, which she saw in Bart. And Christopher the love. So she kind of felt like, she was sort of all these other men were a practice to get to her ultimate true love. On the flip side with Christopher, his first true love, again, not meaning to be in an incestuous way, but it's the whole Oedipal complex, which was his mother.
Yeah.
And Cathy, similar in the way that all these other men she tried to make look like Bart, Cathy looked like Christopher's first love, which was his mother. So I think that Cathy is Christopher's true love. I don't think that Cathy is, or I don't think Christopher is Cathy's. I think it's the other way around. And I think one thing I kind of didn't care for in the Lifetime adaptation was that they kept trying to make Christopher the sort of knight in shining armor, because I think they had decided behind the scenes that, they knew the story was going to ultimately end with Cathy with Christopher, so they wanted to keep projecting that image of like, no, he is this perfect guy despite them being related. And I think that in the books, if Cathy kind of makes flippant comments about, Christopher's getting it on with a lot of girls. He's had his fun. He moved away. He did this. But he was always obsessed with Cathy. Cathy was willing to let Christopher go. She was willing to move on. She's told him time and time again, go live your life. I set you free. It's all good. But he kept coming back, and eventually Julian was gone, Bart was gone, Paul was gone, and Christopher was the last man standing, and that's why she was with him. And I don't refute any of what you said. I think that Christopher was wonderful for standing up in the attic and playing that father role, the supporting role. He took care of Cathy's children throughout the years in If There Be Thorns, and dealt with Bart Jr.'s attitude all the time, and you completely accepted Jory's love, and he had nothing but love for those kids. And that's great, but that's, again, because Cathy is his true love. But unfortunately for Christopher, Bart is Cathy's true love, in my opinion. She wanted all these other men to have the traits of Bart, who she loved since she was 15 years old. Actually, I think since 12 years old, seeing him from the chest in the ballroom area. And she saw this man with the mustache, which is what she, forever. And that was before she started having any untoward feelings towards her brother. And I do think, those are valid points to make.
You got me. He was totally planning that side swipe, by the way.
I wasn't, but
anyway.
I was getting nervous because she was making really good points, and I'm like, I have to say this in a way that's gonna possibly change her mind.
No, I agree with you. I guess I didn't look at it at that angle of Cathy being Chris's true love, and I think that's a really great point. But obviously, we never really know what's going on in VC Andrew's mind, so it's always fun to do these little shorts with you.
Yeah, I think that, and what's great is that, a character like Cathy, and a character like Cathy is so narcissistic, and it appeals to our narcissistic angles, and I like the idea that, like, all these men fall in love with Cathy, or with us through Cathy, and so it's kind of like, Cathy is everybody's true love in these novels.
Right.
She's the one all the men love, so she's everybody's true love. But who is Cathy's true love? And I think that ultimately it's Bart Winslow. It's not Paul Sheffield. It's not Julian Marquette. And I think she loves Christopher, and they have a pure love that is selfless, and that is also in its own way true. And I won't refute that. But I think that the man, based on the events of the stories, ultimately was supposed to be Bart, and I think she felt guilty in If There Be Thorns, which is why I think she felt so guilty, she always would say, or to Bart Jr., her relationship, because she knew that if she thought about Bart, she would never stop crying because it was her true love. I think she would have been always devastated and upset, and because of that, she shut those feelings down, and that trickled down to her guilt and revenge she had looking at the son that was created out of it. But
I mean, we always want to hear what you guys think.
Please,
and if anybody has any valid points about Julian or Paul, we definitely want to hear those.
Yes, I agree. Please comment below, as always. I'm sure Flowers in the Attic, Steele series, all those, I think, have a lot of fans and a lot of opinions, and I already know a lot of you are going to have opinions. But who do you think? Do you think Cathy's true love is Julian, Bart, Paul, or Christopher? Do you agree with us, with me, and maybe kind of now Danielle, that Bart is her true love, or do you think it's Christopher?
Hopefully we didn't forget anybody.
Yeah, I don't think so. Well, I did make a sort of comment to Danielle the other day. I'm like, well, maybe, what if it was really one of those, like, other ballet boys that Julian never let her, like, go on a date with? I was like, maybe it's Alex, and she's like, no, Alex was Carrie's. But, she did have two guys that Julian roommated with that tried to ask her out. I'm like, it was probably one of them that was really her true love, and she just never got to actually, dance or meet him or go on a date with. But and then Julian also left her. Remember that in the car? Sorry, I know we're way past now. We're in the end of this, but I just remember Julian leaving her and taking her purse, and just she had to get back in a storm.
Horrible.
Oh, just horrible. He was horrible. But yes, please let us know what you think. Thank you for watching another episode of 411 Pop Culture, where real people really do talk about really everything. Thanks, Danielle, for doing this episode, and we promise we'll have another one out soon. Have a good one.
Obviously, this is a little bit more difficult because it is her brother. But I think when two people share a traumatic experience like that.
Sorry, I got thirsty this time. 3.
All right, well, hold on.
Yeah. I'm like, I think I can do it quietly, and then I'm like, glug, 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 glug.
I've been dreaming about sipping that. Sorry. You okay? Jesus.
I guess we have our blooper. Shoot. I'm all right.
Take a breath.
No, I'm fine. I'm good.
Okay. Right.
Okay. So you say it's traumatic. I guess I'm not ready. I keep thinking my voice is going to come out. There it is. Okay. Oh my goodness. I got thirsty.
Okay.
All right, there it is. No, but it'll be back by the time you finish your thought.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
John Amos